Okay. All right, I'll share my screen now. Okay, Chrome DevTools is a really powerful tool for debugging. One of the biggest issues that I see with bootcamp grads is lacking a workflow for fixing bugs. So let's see here. Let's see. So I'm going to go to Atom here and open an application that I made during our first review session. Oh, there it is. Great. Whoops, wrong link here. Okay, so if you recall from the review session, I'll click on play around here, and then it should send an AJAX request getting a list of questions from Open Trivia Database, a website that has just a huge database of a really easy to use API. So let's see here. I click play around and it doesn't work. Okay. So we can always right-click on the page and inspect. Personally, I like to do Command-Option-I. Just opens up the console. It's a little bit quicker. All right, so we look at the console here. Okay, printed some things out. This is how we usually have debugged things in the past. But I don't see the actual quotes coming up, and the button kind of went away, but not really. So, a lot of times what we would do is just go into our game file and just kind of look at it and see what doesn't make sense or whatever. It's a lot more efficient to use DevTools, right? So to me, maybe I don't see any error here about our AJAX request. Let me see, are we sending it at the right place? Is that how it's undefined. Well, of course, that makes sense, right? That query URL is undefined because once this function is done running, we no longer have access to query URL. It goes into garbage collection. The computer just, doesn't have a place of memory for it, so it just gets rid of it. So this is really hard, right? Like how can we see what the value of this is during the program? Well, we can jump over to sources. We can do Control-P, and then now we can search inside of our project directory for the file. All these other files here is just because we use jQuery here. So they show you all of the source files that are kind of like integrated into your project. Of course, we can't change this file, right? This is official jQuery, which defines the language.
Right.
So we go to game.js, and now we can see here. And what we can do is we can add breakpoints by clicking on line numbers. And what it will do is that when the program hits this line in its flow of execution, it pauses the program and gives us a snapshot of the application at that point. It's a really powerful tool because when we pause there, we can see the value of variables. We can see, the exact issue here, line by line.
So with that stopping at 6, so you would get var amount param, but you won't get var amount num. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Because exactly, like JavaScript looks at this, your JavaScript engine on your browser looks at all of this and says, okay, this is all going to be done at the exact same time, so I'm going to do it line by line in order here. And so since it's going line by line, if I put this breakpoint here, we will not evaluate amount num yet.
Okay.
We'll just be stopped here. So let's see. We'll reload the page. And of course, we haven't hit the breakpoint yet, right? Because the breakpoint is inside of this event handler that only runs when we click on start. Now, right, if I wanted to actually pause the page before we even click on that, then I could set it here, because this code runs regardless, right? Just by starting up the file, it puts the click handler on start. So
Okay.
so now it's paused at this time. So we haven't evaluated any of this code yet. So if I was to do, I can jump over here, do query URL. I'm going to get rid of this stuff in array. It's just kind of out of scope right now. All right, there we go. Get rid of that noise in the console. Okay, so now we're here. Now if I did query URL, still undefined, right? Because we haven't actually gotten to that line of code yet. So yes. I'm going to actually put the breakpoint here, because it's just not very interesting at this point. Okay, so now I click play around, and now we're actually inside of this variable. I mean, inside of this function, which is really helpful because you can run your mouse over and see the values of all the different variables. You can also see the scope of what's local to here. And of course, all these variables that we haven't defined yet because it's later in the program. And, for something like this is hard for me to view using this kind of hover window here. So you can always just jump over to console and, you can copy it. And then you can see the value at that point in time. So you can expand it and more easily look at all the information.
Can you do that again one more time?
Yeah, so what I did here was, as I said, when you're paused at this snapshot here, at this breakpoint, I can peek at all the value of all the variables at that point, even document, and I can see all the functions as they're defined here. So to me, as I said, like when you hover over this, it's just hard for me to view it in this small little hover window. So a lot of times will just highlight the variable, copy it, and then move over to console. So that, and besides, in console, when it gets clogged up, with a lot of stuff here, I like to clear it. Just click on this button to clear it.
Okay.
So query URL, or what, I didn't want to look at query URL, I wanted to look at this. And then you see, right, of course, we can expand it and look at all the different properties. It's a really good way also to determine what exactly you want to cite. Like, so if I wanted, this, and I want the value of that button, I would see, like, where is play around in here? Okay. Like, do I see it anywhere? Okay, we have the button here. Okay. And then I would see, okay, I can see the class. You can see the ID. You can see the child nodes, which is going to be more of an issue later. And we can see all of the CSS properties. I didn't even know you could do that here. And then our value, which we see is blank now, which makes sense, right? Because it's after this line of code.
Yes.
In which we do this .empty. So we see it change over time, right? Like, so now that we're paused in this program, we have two options. We can either do play here, which will just continue the execution of the whole file until it's either over or, done loading, or until it hits the next breakpoint. So if I just did this, it goes till the end. Program is done executing. But let's say I reload it again. We'll do play around again. What this one does is allows us to go to the next function. So see, we can go line by line here and determine the issue and look at it over time. Then we go to query. Okay. So now that looks like the issue right here. with our AJAX request is we're sending it at the wrong, we have this 10 going before the amount. Like this is the parameter here. And you see how this is just a lot, it's a lot easier to see what the exact problem is. So now I can jump over to query, can search it here. And you see that we get autocomplete here. It shows us all the possible things we could be referring to. Really nice. And then we can punch it in and we see, of course, it's wrong. Another small thing that kind of allows you to go through DevTools faster is just like in Terminal, you can go up and down to see previous things you've typed in here. So it can be really efficient, so you don't have to just keep retyping it. Okay. So, well, let's correct that real quickly. So let's see. And by the way, like sometimes I will just change the code in here. You can change the code live in DevTools. And you could do like a post request or something like this. So you can yeah, of course, when you refresh the page, this code will be gone. It doesn't persist. But you can change it and then run it like this. So if we go play through now, well, we sent a post request at that address. All right, so I'm going to change this real quick. I think looks like the issue is these are the wrong way around. Amount param plus amount num. Okay. So now we click play around. And we can see the query URL, we can see it, and you see we haven't actually sent the AJAX request yet.
Oh.
So now we can look at it and see, okay, so we sent it here, and now we haven't done any of this code yet. See, we haven't actually put the questions that we got back on the DOM. If we sent the right question, we'll see. So let's see, can we see the response? Response is not defined here. Why is that? Because we're not inside this line of code yet.
Mm.
We're up here still, right?
Yes.
Now we are in here. You see response is not defined. That's just from our previous thing here. Response is still not defined. Okay. And now we can play through here. Okay, so they all came up. And a lot of times the thing that will confuse people with DevTools is that you'll jump inside of the files that we're referring to, right? Because like when we use AJAX, if we have an error, if we have some jQuery error, the error isn't really in our code, right? The error is in upstream and like all the jQuery documentation which defines these functions.
Yes.
Okay, so let's see here. So I'm going to take out this breakpoint, and I'm going to put the breakpoint right inside here so that I know I'll be able to see the response. So, okay, we play around, and now I'm inside here, and I can see the response. I can put it at, can take it out, all of this. Another small tip that I like to do with DevTools is sometimes I will not just take the query, well, do we still have access to query URL here? No, because that function terminated. So what I might do is I console log the query URL here inside of the response. And then when we play around, okay, it showed up, there it is. Now I can click on it and see if I open it in a new tab. And I can see it just very easily, the whole thing, if I want to view it. So let's see here. Okay, one more thing that I want to just cover is, so this is a really effective way, again, to just see the values as you move through the program, check their scope, because like right here, we're inside of this line of code. So let's say I've been referencing question div. I could see, is question div defined here? No, so we don't have actually access to it in this line, from this line of scope. So when you're doing console, console is from where you are in the program at that point in time. So it's a really effective tool snapshot. So that's why, again, when we don't use DevTools and we just run to the end of the program, we can't see the values of any of these variables that are local because the functions are done executing. So the variables are destroyed. All right, so last thing, some small tips with, so once again, I can do clear here. Well, I guess like that. Another thing is that you can actually, a lot of people have extensions and things like that to do color picking on a website. You can actually just pop open DevTools, click on let me do, Control Z. You can also undo things. Anything you do here, like if I say 20px and change it on the fly, right? We do this a lot. This is my workflow for CSS, by the way, is I do things, I just pretty much do all of my work on Chrome DevTools and then move it over to my file. But anyways, let's say I didn't want to do padding 20px, I can do Control Z and just change it. Command Z, I should say. But a lot of people have, so Control Z. A lot of people have extensions for color picking, but you can just use this thing and look on the page to find different colors. So you don't need those extensions. They're just kind of adding bloat to your browser. So Command Z undid it. Of course, I can change things. The other thing I like about DevTools is that when we copy the code for, here, like this, if I move it over straight to my CSS thing, I can undo it. And then it'll even comment out the properties that I canceled over here.
Oh.
So they have a lot of effective things. All right, now the last thing, something that we're probably not going to have to worry about that much, especially with these API calls, is we can jump over. So some API calls are really taxing. Getting a bunch of trivia questions is obviously lightning fast. We're just getting some plain text here. But let's say we were getting images or something more robust than that. We can jump over to this networks tab here, and we can see XHR. That just means basically HTTP requests, which is what we send when we do an AJAX request. We can go here and look and see how many milliseconds it took. So if we have other events on the site, they're depending on it, it's a good power. So let's say instead of doing 10, I wanted to say, we'll get 100 questions. So play around. Okay. And we see, doesn't even affect the time. So there's no reason for us to even worry about whether we send 10 or 100. But if we were talking about images, like Google Images, we might want to do a small request because it might make a big difference in time whether we get 10 or 100. So anyways, and we can even come here and you can see how long it takes your files to execute. So a lot of times, if you're trying to optimize, maybe you'll reduce the number of function calls you do, and you can see if it makes an impact here in performance. The last thing I'll point out is you can also use this audits tab to perform different types of audits on your page. I use this accessibility tool sometimes. It doesn't allow you to do it on local pages like this. But if we were at a website like here, like Gmail, I can use these audits. So the accessibility audit is a really nice one, and it's pretty informative. I'm always learning a way a website could be done a little more effectively. All right, so that's my workflow for using DevTools.
Documentation, is there Chrome has documentation for all these little things?
Yes, Chrome has lots of documentation for it. One more thing also, actually, I do want to show.
Okay.
I'll share my screen again. So inspect, right? I could have used Command Option I once again. Is that DevTools also allows you to do like basic JavaScript here. So I can say like find topics zone on the page. And this $sign is not jQuery. This is just Google made some shorthand for document.query selector.
Oh.
Okay. The reason why it comes up jQuery right now, well, let me just look at a page here. Let's say, let me just show you something. The reason you don't have access to jQuery in console unless you actually have the script tag in your file. If you don't have the script tag in your file, it thinks the $sign is going to be a document.query selector, and we wouldn't have access to things like this, you know?
Oh.
We wouldn't have access to stuff like that because this is a jQuery method. So something to keep in mind. Now, of course, you can actually go into here and install jQuery on your console, but that's something to look up yourselves. All right, so that's a wrap. I hope you found this helpful. Please look at Chrome DevTools documentation. There's just so many things you can do with it. For CSS, for JavaScript, for measuring performance, auditing for accessibility. Really getting good at DevTools will speed up your development time tremendously. All right, guys, I'll see you tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.